sailed into the Arctic carrying 129 men. They had tinned food for years, a library of more than 1,000 books, steam-driven heating, and the full confidence of the most powerful nation on earth. Not one of them came home. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Only a few miles from where those men slowly froze and starved, Inuit families were sleeping warm through that very same winter, nursing newborns, waking rested, going out to hunt. Same ice, same darkness, same 84 degrees below zero, 64 below Celsius. Cold turns steel brittle enough to shatter like glass and kills exposed skin in under 30 seconds. So the real question was never why the British died. The question is why the Inuit didn't. And the answer is not that they had more than the Royal Navy, it's that they had less, and that turned out to be everything. Because survival here never began with fire. It didn't begin with tools. It didn't begin with shelter. It began with snow. The British brought everything they thought they needed. That was the mistake. We'll come back to them. To the men on those ships, snow was an obstacle. Something to be shoveled, endured, waited out. The most worthless substance in a place that was already trying to kill them. And that misreading, more than the cold itself, is what doomed them. Because snow in the Arctic is not frozen water in any way they understood, it is a material in transition. When wind drives across the open ice for days, it doesn't just pile the snow up, it compresses it. Grain crushing into grain until the crystals bond into something new. It's called firn, a natural composite, a lattice of interlocked ice holding millions of microscopic pockets of air. And in extreme cold, trapped air is not nothing. It is one of the finest insulators on Earth. Warmth is not created by heat. It is created by trapping it. That single idea was the whole difference between the two peoples on that ice. The British carried sources of heat, coal, alcohol, stoves, all of it finite, all of it burning down towards zero. The Inuit carried something the British couldn't even see. The logic of holding heat in. The warmth you generate will always leave you. The warmth you trap will stay. And knowing which snow could trap it was a skill as fine as any read in a medical chart. An experienced Inuit builder could press a knife into a drift and read the layers beneath like an X-ray, feeling exactly which stratum would bear alone and which would crumble. Then came the building itself. The blocks were never simply stacked. They were locked into a rising spiral, each one tilted slightly inward, so every ounce of weight was carried down toward the center. It's the same principle as a catenary dome. A form European architecture would need centuries and a great deal of mathematics to describe. The Inuit built it by feel, and everything the British carried to save themselves was, quietly, working against them. Once the dome was sealed, something began to happen inside it that needed no fuel at all. A resting human body throws off heat at about the rate of a small light bulb, useless on its own in open air. But inside a closed, insulated dome, that warmth stops escaping. It gathers, it settles, it climbs, until the interior sits at 50 or 60 degrees Fahrenheit, while the world outside stays locked at 64 below. And the structure doesn't fight the physics, it directs them. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. So the entrance tunnel is cut lower than the sleeping platform, and the cold simply pools down in the passage where it can't reach anyone. Then the quietest miracle of all. The breath of the sleepers rises, meets the snow, condenses, and freezes into a thin glaze of ice. Night after night the walls thicken. The house grows stronger from the people living in it. Now, hold that against the British. Their wool uniforms soaked up sweat and then froze into rigid plates of ice around their bodies. Their tents sealed the moisture in until everything inside was wet and lethal. Their stoves melted snow for water beautifully, right up until the fuel ran out, and then they had nothing. Every piece of equipment that was supposed to save them was, in the end, spending something that could not be replaced. Their technology was built to fight the cold. Inuit technology was built to agree with it. And so those men died, dragging silver, cutlery, and leather-bound books across the ice on sledges, hauling an entire civilization behind them, carrying everything except the one thing that would have kept them alive. But clothing and shelter were only half of it. The other half was the body itself, and a rule so simple that no one in the Royal Navy ever thought to learn it. The way the Inuit dressed was never really about warmth. It was layered logic. The inner layer managed moisture, pulling it off the skin. The middle layer held a cushion of still air, an invisible buffer against the cold. The outer layer stopped the wind and the driven snow at the boundary. And the reason that inner layer mattered most is the rule that killed so many outsiders. In the Arctic, sweat kills faster than wind. The materials were just as deliberate. Caribou hair is hollow down its core, so every strand is a tiny sealed tube of trapped air. Sealskin stays supple and waterproof at temperatures where modern fabrics stiffen and split. At night, the same logic ruled: sleep, a sealskin shell, a caribou lining, stones heated in the fire and set near the feet, and the core to release warmth slowly until dawn. The sleeping platform raised into the warmest layer of air, and bodies lying close, so their shared heat ran 30 or 40 degrees above the air around them. But the deepest piece of Inuit survival wasn't worn or built at all. It was a rule about giving things away. A hunter who hoarded his kill was a dead man walking, because meat rots, luck turns, and no one hunts forever. So the successful hunter gave the meat away, and in doing so he created something better than a full stomach. An obligation, a web of debts that would feed him when his own hunt failed. Generosity in the Arctic was never a virtue, it was insurance. Wealth you hold freezes, wealth you give away comes back as heat. And this is the exact thing the Franklin expedition never had. 129 men, and some of them starved with food still in the stores, because they had no network to fall into and no one to share it with. But the deadliest thing on that ice was never in the body. It was in the mind, and in what people were willing to believe. Fear, out on that ice, was never just a feeling. It carried a physical cost. A frightened body burns oxygen faster, breathes shallow and quick, and bleeds heat at a rate a calm body never would. Panic is a temperature, so the Inuit trained the mind first. Children grew up on stories where the Arctic was not an enemy, but a test of attention, a place that rewarded the person who noticed and punished the one who reacted. Laughter did real work out there, steadying the breath, breaking the spiral before it could start. Even breathing was taught, slow and through the nose, so the air was warmed before it reached the lungs, and no one went out alone, because isolation was the true killer, and shelters left standing along the trails formed an invisible net stretched across a land with no roads. And here the story turns, because the Inuit were not only survivors of that winter, they were its witnesses. In the years after Franklin's ships vanished, it was Inuit hunters who met the search parties and told them plainly what had happened. Men starving, dying as they marched, driven in the end to things no one wanted to hear. In London, the Empire's finest called them liars and savages, and refused every word. A century later, when researchers finally recovered the bones, forensic science confirmed the Inuit account almost detail for detail. The people the Empire had called primitive had been telling the exact truth the entire time. They simply weren't believed, because believing them meant admitting the ice had a grammar, and the British had never learned to read it. That is why 1845 ended the way it did. Those men were not defeated by a lack of technology. They were defeated by certainty, by the conviction that they already understood a place they had never once listened to. Snow became structure, cold became insulation, the body became a furnace, Community became infrastructure, and silence became information. The Arctic never killed the people who respected it. It killed the ones who were sure they already understood it. Survival was never a question of power. It was a question of who was willing to listen. If this stayed with you, stay with us. Next, we step inside the Viking longhouse, the Athabascan winter lodge at 40 below, and the conical shelters of the North American plains. Different people, different extremes, the same refusal to fight